This episode contains discussion of murder of adults and child sexual abuse and not so great police work, but still proud of the police work. Listener discretion is advised.
For 5.5 years, the man dubbed the Yorkshire Ripper terrorized the Yorkshire area of England. 13 women lost their lives, while 7 others were attacked and left scarred mentally and physically. After a fumbled investigation with many wrong turns and deep-rooted opinions, the Yorkshire Ripper was caught purely by happenstance.
Did you guys hear that word, happenstance? You will not believe how proud these police officers are going to be at the happenstance.
Yeah, and they're like, whoops, we got him!
Yeah, exactly. And they're like, we've done it! Yes! It's
like the guys on Arrested Development when they come in and attack whoever, and then they just all high five each other, and they're like, yeah, we did it. Like, yeah,
it's we do have some thank yous though. We had a lot of requests for this case, requested by Laura Ellison, Flo Wheeler, Riley Meredith, Sarah Granby, Ellie McQuiston, Holly Trainer, and Hannah. And then there's also a Laura Ellis listed. I wonder if that's Laura Ellison twice by accident, or do we have a Laura Ellison and a Laura Ellis?
I'm not sure about that. I know Laura Ellis for sure.
A lot of these are our friends from across the pond.
Sure,
as we Americans like to say.
But also, thank you so much to Beth for writing it up.
Thank you. All right, let us get into it. And you guys know, anytime we have a serial killer, we are going to include, obviously, as much information as we can about each victim. There are, like we said, or like Tori said in the description, 13 victims, 7 victims with a whoopsie. I mean, if not for whatever happened, they would also be in that list.
Absolutely.
So, that's a lot of information to cover. Some of these women were sex workers, and so unfortunately were not I'm just gonna say they weren't cared about that much.
No, they were not.
Not by the public and not by the police.
No, not even a little bit. Just I don't understand why certain people throughout history have just not given a about that. These are human beings. These are people too.
Human beings who, if these are all women, so say a man who uses their services was killed, say even by one of the sex workers, that would be an outrage, wouldn't it? Like,
well, you're thinking, I'm thinking Eileen Warnos, right?
Yeah, we'd still care about the victim who was using those services, but we don't care about the people who provide the services that these... What? Okay.
I know.
All right.
Okay. I know.
But also we're going to find out that might not even be true about all of these victims. So it's just the whole thing. All right. So let us begin at the beginning, and when we get to the end, we will stop. Okay.
Yes, we will. Yes.
On October 29th, 1975, the body of a woman was found in Leeds, West Yorkshire, England. Wilma McCann was 28 years old and a mother of 4. She'd been struck in the back of her head twice, and there were 2 groups of stab wounds found on her body. As police began the investigation into Wilma's murder, they came to the conclusion that she was a sex worker and began questioning the red light area in Chapeltown. Now, they came to the conclusion. Based on what? We will never know, but that's the conclusion they came to.
Right. Okay. And it's none of your business how or why.
Yeah, and whether there were actual witnesses who said that or evidence that said, who cares? Nobody's business, right?
Nope.
One witness told investigators they'd seen Wilma jump in front of a car and ask for a ride, and this was on the same road that her body was found on, that's Scott Hall Avenue. So Wilma's son, Richard, told Netflix's The Ripper, which is a main source for this episode, and that's a 4-part series if you want to watch it. If you don't want to watch all 4 parts, we've got you covered. We'll get you the info in an hour. But Richard said that his mom was a survivor. She did whatever she had to do to get money for her family. And he explained that during her marriage to his father, she would often have what he called breakdowns because of the traumatic relationship. And then she would take the kids to social services. But once she divorced her husband, she did not have to do that anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Her mental state seemed to improve drastically once she left this man. And so from that point forward, she was always with her kids. After Richard and his siblings, Sonia, Donna, and Angela, learned about their mother's death, they were told to grab their belongings and they were taken to a children's home. And the police believed Wilma's murder was a, quote, one-off. And they had the stance that, hey, a lot of sex workers get murdered. What are we supposed to do here?
Right. Hazard of the trade, right?
Hazard of the trade. The public's opinion was very much, and they said as much in this documentary, she had it coming.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's how people felt about it. It's horrific. As the police continued their investigation into Wilma's murder, though, another body was found outside of a bakery in Chapeltown, and this was 43-year-old Emily Jackson, who was a mother of 3. The Jackson family was going through a rough patch and was quite close to having to declare bankruptcy. And because of this, Emily had taken to sex work. And Emily's son had to identify her body. Now, she suffered 56 stab wounds and had 2 fractures to the back of her skull. And it was determined that her murder was forensically similar to Wilma McCann's. And an important discovery made was that there were both cross-shaped and rounded stab wounds to Emily's body. It was quickly determined that a Phillips head screwdriver had been used. That many stab wounds is already, like, super disturbing.
Mm-hmm.
But just to think about the force you have to use to stab someone with a Phillips head screwdriver.
Right, because, I mean, it's sharper than a spoon, but it's not as sharp as a knife.
It's
so
not a
you
knife,
you have to have some power behind that to get it through.
That is, I don't know, that really just hit me as like, God, like, that's some hate right there.
Mm-hmm.
That's some hate. There was also a men's size 7 boot print found on her thigh from where she'd been stomped on.
And if that, I mean, everything else is like, wow, this guy really hated, I don't know if he hated all women, which it seems like, but
yeah,
there's a lot of hate there too. You stomped on her.
And there was no need for that. Like, he'd already fractured her skull twice. He'd already stabbed her a bunch, but he's going to stomp on her too. Like,
right.
Enough to leave a boot print on her thigh. It's horrific. Then in February of 1977, another woman was found murdered in a park. Irene Richardson was from a large working class family with 6 sisters and 3 brothers. Irene married George Richardson in 1970 in Blackpool and had 2 children. Irene did leave George in 1975, but he found her in London where they tried to patch up their marriage. But later that year, she ended up leaving again, and this time he didn't go looking for her. And she ended up in Chapeltown in Leeds and was homeless at that point. After a while, she found a place to stay at a bed and breakfast in the red light district. On the night of February 5th, 1977, Irene left the bed and breakfast around 11:15 p.m., allegedly looking for work. Her body was found the next morning by a dog walker in Roundhay Park, I think is how you say that. She was partly face down with her boots laid neatly on top of her back legs.
Wait, not her back legs, on the back of her legs.
Oh my God, back
you
legs.
You did it again.
We only
Front
have 2 legs.
Back legs. I
Oh
know. What are you doing?
Yeah. I don't know.
It's not funny, but it's like the amount of stupidity that is inside of you that's the funny part.
I know. It's really, honestly, it's incredible. It's impressive at this point. Her boots were laid neatly on top of the back of her legs.
There it is.
Not her leg tops, her leg backs. Okay. Her purse was next to her body with its contents laid out neatly beside it. Isn't it like the creepiest when the stuff is neatly at a scene like that? I don't know. That just adds like that extra layer of like, that's
he hung
really
around.
creepy.
He was very meticulous with what he was doing. Yeah.
When her body was examined, there was no semen present or any evidence of sexual assault at all. After this attack, the media dubbed this man the Yorkshire Ripper because of the similarities to the Victorian killer Jack the Ripper. I was telling Andrew about this, and he was like, "Why are they always the Ripper over there?" And I was like, "Well, it's these two, but there probably is more.
But
I guess
two is more than zero, and that's a lot.
That's true.
But also, again, we've talked about this so many times. Why you got to give him like? I'm not saying that it's a cool name, but it's cooler than like the from Yorkshire. You know
exactly.
what I mean? Like,
yeah, I know. And that's part of it. Like, and that actually comes up in this case too, where there's, questions at some point where they're like, are we giving it so much publicity that it's fueling him,
right, yeah.
As the police investigated Irene's murder, they decided that this really killed me. Okay. They said, look, Irene was a respectable woman until 10 days before she got killed, where she began doing sex work. So there is, you're respectable, and now you're not anymore. So just so you know, she used to be respectable, but she's not anymore.
Right. That.
Great. There were tire marks found at the scene that they took photos of, as well as they made like a plastic cast. They wanted to keep this to themselves, though, so that the perpetrator did not know what information they had. The second Ripper victim of 1977 was 33-year-old Patricia Atkinson in April.
There it is.
Patricia was the first person murdered in her own flat in Bradford. Patricia was last seen oh my God. This is one of those situations where, like, I think my brain is like, okay, you got this, Trella. Don't you worry about it. You can read words. You're reading words. And then it's not happening.
It feels like one of those extended, lengthy falls where you're like, oh, is he going down? Is he going down? No, he's going down. That's what you just did, because it started with Patricia Atkinson, and then now we're just, the fall is happening.
Yeah, the like on America's Funniest Home Videos when the guy skiing goes all the way and it's like, and yeah, that's me. Yeah, great.
Yes.
Patricia was last seen leaving the Carlisle Hotel and was also classified as a sex worker. Again, why, you say? Because they said so.
Right.
That's literally the only reason why. At some point, it literally becomes necessary for them to classify all of these women as sex workers, whether or not they were, so that it could fit into their narrative, which is, as we know, top tier police work.
Right.
She was the Ripper's fourth victim in 18 months. That's quick. That's a lot in a short time span. The police found boot prints and blood leading to and from the apartment store, and they believed that he had gone back to adjust Patricia's body before leaving.
See, again, just the going back and like, that is just, it adds this super heavy layer of creepy. Like, it's just
so creepy. The print that they found matched the print found at Emily Jackson's scene. And the police also found Patricia's diary that had many names. Oh my God. Oh my God.
It's a good day to be a podcaster because you have to read, since you're so great at the reading.
I'm Charlie Day level literate is what's happening right now. This is bad.
There need to be just pictures on this page for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Beth, could you from now on just do pictures?
Yeah.
Because that would be great for me. Yeah.
Pop-up book even. And this is all going to bite me right in the ass because I'm being like, oh, Terrell can't read. And then wait till it gets to my part. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The police also found Patricia's diary that had many names written in it. Oh my gosh. And decided that speaking with those listed was a good place to start. Okay. Yeah. I could see that. As the investigation continued into these four murders, both the press and the police made it seem as if the man known as the Yorkshire Ripper hated sex workers. And if you were not a sex worker, you're safe. You don't have to worry about anything. You can go out whenever you want. You can walk home by yourself if you want, because this man can look at women walking down the street late at night and determine
ocular pat down, right?
Yeah, determine that's a sex worker and that's a respectable woman walking from a late night job or whatever.
That's just how what's the right word? Irresponsible.
Irresponsible at best.
Right.
To put that out there. Hey,
Yeah.
he's only after sex workers, so if you're not one, then you're good. Don't even worry about it. You're safe. You cannot tell people that.
0. Exactly.
Yeah. And unfortunately, in June of 1977, a 16-year-old girl named Jane McDonald had been found dead in a playground. And it was determined that she'd not been killed there, but was left there so that it would be easier for her body to be found. Which feels like another taunt, right? Like the police have just said, he hates sex workers. If you're not a sex worker, don't you worry about it. You can do whatever you want to do. And then it feels to me, purposely killed a young girl.
To be like, no one's safe.
Obvious. Yeah. And to point out to the public, you can't trust these guys. They don't know what they're talking about. Yeah, you're not safe. I'm going after whoever I want to. Because he wanted her body to be found. He didn't hide it somewhere where it would take a long time. He wanted it to be found quickly.
Right.
Jane was born on August 16th, 1960 to Wilfred, who went by Wilf. That's fun.
I know. I really enjoy that.
I like that. And Irene McDonald. She had 2 half-sisters named Carol and Janet from Irene's first marriage, and a sister named Deborah and brother Ian. Jane enjoyed dancing and roller skating in her free time and was working at a supermarket at the time of her death, and she was still living at home with her parents, of course, because she was a child.
Yep.
Jane had been with friends the night before her murder and had missed her bus home, so she's waiting for a ride. She gets tired of waiting for the ride, so she's like, you know what? I'm just going to walk home. And then she was attacked around 2 a.m. on Reginald Street in Leeds. Her body was found the next morning around 9:45 a.m. on a playground in Chapeltown. Jane had been hit in the head 3 times with a hammer, stabbed in the chest and back, and a broken bottle was found embedded in her chest.
Jeez.
My God, this is so brutal.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing, all murder is brutal and violent, no? But this is like, I mean, the definition of overkill. Like,
absolutely.
And just so much hatred.
Oh my gosh. Once the police realized that Jane was not a sex worker and was an innocent, and that's literally the word they used. This girl was an innocent. The only innocent thus far, by the way.
Right.
As if any of these other women, and she was innocent, of course. As if any of these other women, deserved what happened to them.
Exactly. They're asking for it, but not.
My God.
And again, not that Jane was asking for it in the least. Of course she wasn't, but none of the other women were either. There is not one instance in anybody's life where somebody is begging to get murdered. I guarantee it.
No, absolutely not. And whatever you have to do or want to do to provide for yourself or your family, that should be applauded.
Absolutely. And also, you should be safe to do it.
Yeah, like, because if it had been the other way around and it's like these women had fallen on hard times and they weren't able to feed their kids or they weren't able to feed themselves sometimes and they were going without meals and blah, 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 and they weren't working, what would people have said? Do something, get a job. Yeah, you're a terrible mom. You should, blah, blah, blah. Like, it's maddening. But after Jane's murder, now it's become national news, and police were going house to house in Keighley, Bradford, and Leeds. Women in Yorkshire were frightened and afraid to be out on their own at night, of course. The police were investigating the murders and collecting what evidence they could. At this time, remember, this is the 70s. We don't have DNA. All they could do was blood grouping. Plus, there was no semen or saliva found at any scene at all. After Jane's murder, the police wrote a letter to the Yorkshire Ripper that was published in the papers. And then, in July of 1977, Maureen Long was attacked in Bradford. She was struck in the back of her head and suffered 4 to 5 stab wounds. However, Maureen survived, and she was able to speak with police about her attack from her hospital bed. She'd been out at a discotheque, and when she left, she was attacked. And after her release from the hospital, Andy Laptew, a police constable with the West Yorkshire Police, took Maureen out to a dance hall to see if they could identify the man who attacked her. the Yorkshire Ripper. And it was set up, he said, as if he was like taking her on a date. So, they're supposed to appear like they're a couple and they're just out like having a good time. And in the Netflix series, The Ripper, Andy said that Maureen liked to drink. And so he had said that his boss gave him 15 quid to go out. He's like, here, that'll cover your expenses or whatever. And he's like, that's not even going to cover the first round, like maybe. And he was like, Maureen liked to drink, so I spent 78 quid that night.
Well, it kind of reminds me of the opposite of 10 Things I Hate About You, where he's like, we're going to go to the movies, right? And she'll want raisinets, so that's $100. And
oh, yeah.
We're gonna,
yeah, exactly. Unfortunately, she wasn't able to identify anyone as her attacker. And because of the way that her attack had happened, she had also suffered some brain damage. And so she really didn't have any memory. Like, she had a memory of going out that night, and the last memory she had of that night is like leaving the place. She doesn't even remember getting attacked or anything like that. So,
I would think that that's kind of like, I would hope that would help her save her from some of the trauma, I would hope, right? But it's also got to be so maddening that you're like, I physically cannot remember.
Yeah,
like,
if I could just remember what he looked like, or
right.
and most of the women, I think, probably didn't ever see him coming.
Sure.
Because his MO is to hit you from behind. In the back of the head. And I can't even imagine what it feels like to get hit in the back of the head with a hammer.
I know.
Your skull is cracked, and then he hits you again, and you go down, and that's it. I mean,
right.
Oh my gosh. The next step in the police investigation was to go undercover in the red light area, because remember, he only attacked sex workers.
In the red light area, sure.
Mm-hmm. And write down license plate numbers of cars that had single men in them. Those numbers would get written down on index cards and sent to the incident room. And in the incident room, the police had hundreds of thousands of index cards. Doesn't that tell us, like, these services are widely used?
Like, maybe we should pivot to a different method of trying to find this guy, because you've got 11 million leads at this point, if you want to call it, right? Yeah. I mean, it's like, this ain't working for you.
But also, you don't hear anywhere in the media anybody refer to these men that they wrote down their license plate numbers as not respectable men. Well, these are men that work in offices. They work in banks. They work in the factories and like whatever, but they're still respectable.
Right. It's the women that they are going to get services rendered that are
who are not.
Yeah.
The flames on the
I know.
Yeah. So they have all these index cards, and they have to go and talk to these people. They have to do whatever they can, follow up on these leads. 3 months after Maureen's attack in October of 1977, a man named Bruce Jones found a body in Manchester. A woman named Jean Jordan had gone missing 9 days prior. This was terrible. He appears in the docuseries. He's recounting finding her. He was doing work like on his farm or on a farm, and he is pushing a wheelbarrow, and he accidentally pushes it over her body and realizes that she's there. And him recounting what she looked like was this happened in 1977. And this man is so choked up about it. Like, you can see it haunts him to this day. Like, it's just so sad. But he said her hair had been burnt off. Her face had been smashed in. Her breasts had been cut off, and she was disemboweled.
Jeez.
What in the world?
Mm-hmm.
Jean Bernadette Jordan was born on December 11th, 1956 in Motherwell, North Lanarkshire, Scotland. She moved later to England, where she lived with her common-law husband, Alan Royal, and their 2 children. She was a sex worker in the Manchester area and was also known as Scotch Jean. She'd gone out the night of October 1st, 1977 to work. She met a man and agreed to a price of £5. Then she was driven to a spot on Princess Road in Chorlton, where she met her untimely fate. Now, at the time of Jean's murder, there were about 400 officers working in West Yorkshire on the case. However, the Ripper had now carried out a murder in Manchester. So here's another like thing that never occurred to them. He could drive a car.
Travel. Yeah.
Yeah. Like now they did say like the motorways were a fairly new thing at this time. So the police weren't used to like this form of travel for this type of crime where like, you know, still. As police searched the area where Jean's body was found, they determined that though she was found under a hedge, she was not there initially. They determined that the Ripper had come back at some point and had moved her body. They also found her purse nearby. And the contents of her purse had been spread out. And it looked to them like the person who had done this had come back and they were looking through her purse for something because it's like they were taking stuff out of her purse and just like throwing it. They missed a little inside pocket though, because men don't understand inside pockets. Like try and tell your husband to find something in your purse and you're like, no, it's in the inside pocket. Never going to find it. So, he had missed that. And that's where she'd put that £5 note. They call it a note. We call it a bill, right? Like, so he'd missed the £5 note. The reason he was adamant about finding this note and missed it was because it was a newly printed note. They had just put these out like a couple months before that, I think. Maybe 3-4 months before that. So it would have been easily traceable because they'd just been printed. So you could find out where they had been sent and then which employers then, because you're paying your employees cash at this point. So they could find out where it had gone. So the police were able to trace the note and went to several factories and then interviewed the employees about the murders. And they said in the docuseries, it was quite possible that the police had spoken to the Ripper during these interviews. Y'all ain't even ready.
No. No.
You're not ready, so just remember that. So 2 months later, in December of 1977, there was another attack in Leeds. Marilyn Moore was hit 3 times by an attacker, but she grabbed onto his trousers and he fled. Marilyn survived her attack, and the police were able to match the tire tracks left at the scene to the tire tracks from Irene Richardson's scene. Marilyn was also able to provide information for a sketch of her attacker. She described a 30-year-old man, at least 30, like around 30, with a beard. He had dark hair, and this photo was put on the wall of every police station. Then in February of 1978, another body was found in a timber yard. 18-year-old Helen Ritka had become the 7th murder victim of the Yorkshire Ripper. Helen was born on March 3rd, 1959 in Leeds. She and her sister Rita had had a chaotic upbringing. When they left home, they both ended up turning to sex work. The night that Helen died, she had been with her twin sister Rita before meeting her killer. Helen had been struck 5 times on her head and stabbed repeatedly in her chest, and she was found 3 days after she was murdered. With 7 murders unsolved at this point, the reward for information that the police were offering increased from £10,000 to £30,000. After this, the calls increased, and they started getting calls from ex-girlfriends, wives, clairvoyants, they said. They referred to it as people pulling cranks. Same you get everywhere, and it's just terrible. Like, you're mad at your boyfriend, so you call and say, I think my boyfriend's the Ripper. Like, come on. Like, it's just terrible.
The punishment does not fit the crime, I guarantee it, if that's what you're doing.
Yeah, exactly. And they added all of these leads onto those index cards that they had in there as well. And there were so many index cards, they said that concrete pillars had to be added so that the room wouldn't collapse. That's a hell of a lot of index cards. Those really suckers are no bigger than your mom's Jack Russell individually.
Well, what is your method of filing these? Like, can you be like, oh my gosh, where is index card 1553? Where did I put it? Like,
yeah, exactly. Ugh, yeah. The 8th victim of the Yorkshire Ripper was found only a month later in March of 1978 on Easter Sunday in Bradford. A woman's hand was found sticking out of a pile of rubbish underneath an old sofa. A passerby had seen the hand and called police. The body was identified as belonging to 22-year-old Yvonne Pearson, who had gone missing 2 months prior. Yvonne Ann Pearson was born on February 2nd, 1956. She had 2 children, Colette and Lorraine. Though she was the 8th body found, she was actually killed prior to Helen Ritka, making Yvonne the Yorkshire Ripper's 7th murder victim, and then Helen the 8th. At the scene, the police found a copy of the Daily Mirror newspaper under Yvonne's arm that was dated a month to the day prior when she had been murdered. So that's Tuesday, February 22nd, 1978. And this told the police that the killer had gone back to put the paper there to taunt them.
That's his favorite thing, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. He's literally like, pew pew, like,
right.
My gosh.
I know.
The public at this point was not too happy. They were getting pretty frustrated with this investigation, and there was graffiti on some building somewhere that said Ripper 8 police nil.
They're not wrong.
They're not wrong, and there can be good implications of public outcry and public outrage, and then there can be the unintended negative implications, which we see here. Do we want to keep the police on it and thinking about it and working on it and not letting it fall by the wayside? Yes, but there are police investigators who, under immense pressure, will try to make any evidence fit their own narrative and their own theory so that it looks like they know what they're, not even that they know what they're doing. I'm not saying that these people didn't know what they were doing, but they're not
on to something.
Yeah. And they're getting closer every day and all this stuff. They're not following the evidence in this case.
Right.
They're just trying to make everything fit what they already think so that they don't look like they've made a mistake. It's maddening. Unfortunately, in May of 1978, the body of 40-year-old Vera Millward was found at the Manchester Royal Infirmary. There were more than 800 staff and patients at the hospital with floodlights around the campus, and the police looked for witnesses, but nobody saw or heard anything. That is one emboldened killer.
Right. That is a very, very highly trafficked, I don't know.
Yeah. It's bright. It's not dark.
Right.
And he's like, I'm going to dump something here, and you still can't find me. You still can't find anybody who saw anything. Like, that is insane to me. Vera Evelyn Millward was born in Madrid, Spain on August 26, 1937. She was the mother of 7 children. Vera was a sex worker and was reportedly going to meet a regular client when she decided to get in the car with a different client. Once at the infirmary, the Yorkshire Ripper attacked Vera with a hammer and then stabbed her, and she was found the next day, making her his 9th murder victim. After the 8th murder, the police decided to change their tactic, and they said, you know what? And again, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. I understand. And they said, you know what? We're just going to ask him if he would just please turn himself in. That would really help us out. Like, listen, man, you've done your thing. You've made your point. We get it. Can you just turn yourself in? Because we are having a hell of a time finding you.
Right. Like, how is that? That's just gonna, I can imagine after this happens, right? The Ripper is like, I've bested them again. Like,
yeah.
I don't think that, obviously it didn't work. I mean, we're not talking about 8 murders. We're talking about 13 murders. So.
Right. Yeah. And like, they tried to go under the premise of like, you know, appealing to his humanity or whatever and being like, you need help, man. Like, a doctor could help you. And like, you know, this isn't, I don't know if you know this, but this isn't normal. We don't do these things. Like, and yeah, he was like, I don't think I want to do that. No. Like,
no.
So around this time, they start receiving letters from who they believe to be the Yorkshire Ripper, and the letters were signed Jack the Ripper. He wrote about knowing that Vera had had surgeries prior to her murder, which was true, and he also threatened that he would kill again. The letters were sent for fingerprinting, and the gum strip was sent for testing. The police learned that the letter writer was a B negative secretor. After this, the police ended up receiving a tape out of the blue. Just all of a sudden, they get a tape one day. And so now they have the letters, a tape, the boot print, the 5-pound note, the tire tracks, his blood group, handwriting, and then that sketch of Marilyn's assailant. So they're beginning to feel like the investigation is getting somewhere, right? They're going to catch him soon, any day now. All this good police work is going to lead somewhere. But then in April of 1979, a body was found in Halifax. 19-year-old Josephine Whitaker was found in the playing fields at Seville Park. It had been 11 months since the last murder. Josephine Ann Whitaker was born on December 19th, 1959, in Halifax Metropolitan Borough of Calderdale, West Yorkshire, England. Whew.
That would be a really, you need a long envelope to address anything to her.
Yeah, we just don't do it that way over here in the States. That's a lot of commas there.
It's a mouthful, yeah.
Yeah, she was a middle-class clerk that worked at the Halifax Building Society. So it's a respectable woman because she wasn't a sex worker. And after Josephine's murder, the police now believed, hang on, wait a second, nobody's safe.
Women aren't, for sure, right?
Yeah, no woman is safe.
Got that right.
Yeah, like it was not until this point that they say, actually, you know what? No woman is safe.
Yeah. 9 murders. 9. And they were like, I kind of think that, yeah, it might be all women. It might be.
Now that I think about it. Yeah. One of Yorkshire's officers, George Oldfield, who was one of the men in charge of the Ripper investigation, played the tape sent to them, quote from the Ripper, to the Halifax police with the belief that it was from the same person who had sent the letters, also with the firm belief that this is their man. This is him. Again, based on what?
I know.
He says he's the Ripper, so he has to be.
Yeah. We're really, really hoping that this is it.
Yeah. So the tape said, quote, I'm Jack. I see you're still having no luck catching me. I have the greatest respect for you, George, but Lord, you're no nearer to catching me now than 4 years ago when I started. I reckon your boys are letting you down, George. You can't be much good, can you? I'm not quite sure when I will strike again, but it will be sometime this year. I'm not sure where. Maybe Manchester. I like it there. There's plenty of them knocking about. They never learn, do they, George? At the rate I'm going, I should be in the book of records. I think it's up to 11 now, isn't it? Well, it's been nice chatting to you, George. Yours, Jack the Ripper. After listening to the tape and checking the letters, the police determined that the letters were sent from Sunderland, and the man on the tape had a Sunderland accent. So they now believed that they had what they needed with the handwriting and the accent, so they started searching in Sunderland. Also, if you're born in Sunderland, can you not move to Yorkshire?
No, you cannot.
I'm just like, they're like, well, his accent is from here, so we will only look here.
Right.
But even in pioneer days, you could ride your damn horse somewhere else. I just don't okay. So they investigated a square mile in Sunderland searching for this man. There were 100 detectives making inquiries in this 1 square mile about the Ripper. In September of 1979, the 11th murder victim was found in Bradford. Barbara Leach, a 20-year-old student, was found just 150 yards from her home. She was studying psychology at Bradford University and was walking home after a night out with friends. She was followed by the Yorkshire Ripper until he attacked her from behind. He dragged her into an alleyway where he then stabbed her, and she was found 2 days later after her friends had reported her missing. Barbara Janine, who went by Babs Leach, was born on January 5th, 1959 in Kettering, Northamptonshire, England.
There you go.
To David and Beryl. I don't think I've ever heard that name before now.
It's like Cheryl, but with a B.
It is. She had a sibling named Graham. After the murder of Babs, female students were bussed home from university for their safety. The chief constable launched Project R at this time as well, and the police publicly put out the letters they received as well as the audio from the tape. They played the audio and had the letters posted all over the area and spent about £1 million on the project. They literally, it was almost like in movies where you see the police cars driving down the road, blaring with one of those megaphone things, whatever message, everybody's got to be in bed by this, or in your home by this time or whatever.
Right.
But they're just playing the tapes everywhere. They're going to bars, stopping what's going on, playing these tapes. under the assumption that this is the person. And they're like, who recognizes his voice? Who recognizes this handwriting?
And they spent £1 million on it.
Pounds. Oh my gosh. The Sunderland police were searching for the letter writer, but they received no calls from anyone saying that they thought they knew who the letter writer was. Once the Sunderland police had all 3 letters that the Yorkshire police had received, David Zakpison, a detective inspector, realized that the writer was using Victorian language. So he goes and he looks up the 1888 letters that were written by Jack the Ripper, and he starts finding several similarities with the wording. Like there are phrases that are being repeated in both letters. So he thought whoever was writing these letters was using the 1888 letters as a script and was just kind of like copying them. He also realized at the time that the letters were sent that Yvonne Pearson's body had not yet been found, but the letter writer had never said anything about that in the letters. And that would have been a perfect time for this person to say, I'm so far ahead of you that I've already killed another woman and you haven't even found her body yet.
Right.
We know this person likes to taunt the police, but he doesn't mention something that's not already been printed in the newspapers. And then he goes and cross-references, and everything that this person writes in these letters has already been printed in the media. It's not a good sign, George. Okay. So David was like, the letters in the tape are a hoax, dude. Like, this is not our guy. So he submitted a report stating this. Hey, here are the reasons that this probably isn't real. And George Oldfield was like, don't say me that, actually. Right. Just don't say me that. Like, David was like, I thought the whole trajectory would change, right? And he was like, nothing changed. There's still...
George Oldfield is like, I am too stressed to listen to this.
Yeah.
Like, completely makes sense information. Like, no, we're not doing it.
Yeah. Like, I already have this trajectory in my head. I need these letters to pan out. I need this voice to be his voice. And so now I cannot stray from that. Everything must fit that the letters and the tape were sent by the actual killer.
Right.
Again, irresponsible is not the right word.
Right.
In October of 1980, Maureen Lee, also known as Mo, was out with some friends the weekend before her 21st birthday when she was attacked. She was an art student at Leeds University and was out celebrating, and her friends had decided it was getting late. They're going to call it a night. She'd only had 2 beers at the pub, so when her friends split off to go toward the park, she goes the other way towards the bus stop. The street light in that area was out, and it was darker than the other street she had been on, but she knows her way around, so she keeps going. And then she hears a voice behind her with a Yorkshire accent that she did not recognize. She was scared. And I think she said she turned around and she looked at this man. She's like, I don't recognize him. He's talking to me. I'm going to keep going. So she turns around and starts going towards the bus stop. And then she starts picking up her pace. And this person behind her is picking up their pace just behind her. So she's getting creeped out. And eventually this person catches up to her and she feels a blow to the top of her head. She woke up in a hospital bed with a broken jaw, a fractured skull, a cracked eyebrow, puncture wounds to the back of her head, cuts, bruises, and swelling. And the doctors explained to her that her injuries were similar to those of other Ripper victims. And the police came to ask her about her attack, and she explained to them in detail what had happened, that the voice had a Yorkshire accent, everything, but she never heard back from them after that day. And she felt like they had played down her attack because of the public ridicule that they were facing. Like, oh, it couldn't be the same person because she's not a sex worker, and we know he's after sex workers. Like,
right. And he had a Yorkshire accent.
And
but
he had a
we
Yorkshire
know
accent.
that this guy's from Sunderland. So,
yep. After months of Project R, nothing came about, and by November of 1980, there was another murder. The Yorkshire Ripper's 13th and final murder victim was 20-year-old Jacqueline Hill. Jacqueline was born on May 22nd, 1960 in Middlesbrough, North Yorkshire, England, and she was killed on November 17th, 1980. She was a third-year student at Leeds University, and she was studying French. The Ripper attacked her with a hammer and then dragged her body to a nearby waste ground where he then stabbed her with a screwdriver. After Jacqueline's murder, the West Yorkshire police put a curfew on women. Just women!
Yeah.
Because if you are a woman, you're not safe. And honestly, I'm just going to go ahead and admit this. When they first said that and women started being like, why should we have to be the ones with a curfew? I'm like, well, because it's dangerous for you to be out. They're trying to help. Like, that's how ingrained that way of thinking is.
Yep.
And then I started thinking about it and I was like, wait a second. Why isn't the curfew on men?
Right.
Because then if you've got a man who's going to blatantly ignore that curfew, you can look into him.
Right.
Excuse me?
Uh-huh.
The attacker is a man. Why should all women have to stop their lives? Because guess what? Women still work. There are still women who are taking night classes. I can't get out and live my life because there is a man who who has lost his privilege of living in society. Like,
right.
Are you okay?
I know.
It was a whole thing. So, public anger was just off the chain at this point. The women of Yorkshire organized a march with signs that read "Men off the streets" and begged the question, why do women have to stay home? It was the quote, "Reclaim the Night March." And it wasn't just about the Yorkshire Ripper. It was about all men who were violent, right? Because this is not the first man, and it's not the last man to commit violent acts against women because there are women out at night, which are easy targets for them.
Right. Absolutely.
And that's not even to mention violent crimes that happen against women and by people you know and in your relationships, you know, all the things.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't we put restrictions around men then?
Well, that's exactly the point, right? Like, it's not fair that women have to, like, oh, well, don't wear that short skirt and don't go out at night and don't be by yourself. And, well, you know, boys will be boys. They can't help themselves. So we've got to police women.
Yeah, I gotta tell you, I feel like such a dummy, but it literally, I was like today years old when I was like, why don't we put a curfew on men? Can you imagine?
Same.
Can you imagine how different the world would be if men had to be inside their homes by 10 o'clock at night?
Well,
what would that do to our crime rates?
Right. And the squawking, they would be so mad.
Oh,
you can't tell me what to do. You can't make me stay home.
And look, ideally, nobody would have to have a curfew, right?
Sure, yeah.
Nobody would have to have a curfew.
Be good and stop up. But I mean, it's tale as old as time, right? Like,
yeah.
If you could act right, then we could all live life in harmony, but you can't act right. So
and you know, I know we're going to get some comments from men who are very angry about this point of view and things like that, but I mean, the statistics speak for themselves. And honestly, I mean, we were just talking about this with victim suspect. Men are impacted by violence as well. You know, with the sexual assault numbers that we talked about in that documentary, it was 1 in 4 women will be sexually assaulted. That number goes up if you are an Indigenous woman. It was 1 in 2, wasn't it?
I think so.
But 1 in 6 men are also sexually assaulted in their lifetime.
Right.
It affects everybody.
Absolutely.
Like, I don't know. So anyway, I just was like, wow, I never even thought of that.
Well, yeah, it didn't cross my mind either. I was like, we got to protect these women. Gosh, like, stay home.
Yeah, so keep them at
go
home.
out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. While the investigation was still in, absolute disarray, reporter Joan Smith requested any files that the FBI had on the Ripper. So she used the Freedom of Information Act, the FOIA, and she sent a request in. So she gets a letter which has all the documents from the FBI, and she learned that the reports on the women that were killed were extremely misogynistic. And you can say, so, you know, she said, there are these horrible remarks about the victims in the reports, like Wilma McCann being neglectful of her children, and her home. But it turned out that and this has been put out to the media. They say Wilma McCann, a sex worker, was found dead, all this stuff. That was an assumption that they made. They did not know that.
I mean, same with Irene Richardson. Like,
yes, they just assumed that they were engaged in sex work because they were out late at night. You know who else might have made that assumption? The Yorkshire Ripper.
Yeah.
Now we're on the same wavelength as a serial killer. Like,
right.
And these are the people you're supposed to be protecting. I mean, I don't understand it. And Joan realized that Wilma McCann was not the first victim. She was his first to be killed. The first known attack was in 1969 when he used a socks with stones in it to hit a woman.
He used a socks.
Is that what I said?
That is
one
what you
sock,
said.
multiple stones.
There
okay.
you go. Yeah.
She had survived, but she declined to press charges. Then there was Olive Smelt, who was attacked on August 15th, 1975 in Halifax. She was struck with a hammer and attacked with a knife, but a passing car had interrupted this attack. She was 46 at the time of her attack. She was not engaged in sex work. She had spoken to him and told the police that he had a Yorkshire accent.
No, he did not.
Don't say me that. This man who attacked her in the same way that every single one of these victims that they found was attacked. And she says he has a Yorkshire accent. And I don't know how, if you just say he had a Yorkshire accent, does that just give you this very like small area to search? Maybe, maybe not. But remember, they did all of these interviews with people. And they could have picked out the ones with a Yorkshire accent, couldn't they?
Yeah. Now we're playing a game of Guess Who. And we just, nope.
Exactly. He has a Yorkshire accent. Those stay up. Exactly. But the police excluded this evidence from their investigation because it did not fit with what they wanted it to be. Despite two women telling the police that the man that had attacked them had a Yorkshire accent, the police eliminated anyone who didn't have and I don't remember how they said this. Was it Geordie accent?
It's Geordie.
Geordie, okay. Which from what it seems like is the accent you would hear in Sunderland where the letters and tape came from, because remember they were very up on the Sunderland or whatever.
Yeah, let's check out this 1 square mile.
Yeah,
in Sunderland.
Correct us if we're wrong on what that accent is. And the people of England believe that the police were just never going to catch the Yorkshire Ripper. They were like, if they haven't caught him now, they're not going to catch him. I mean,
yep. Understandably so, because they've botched it. It's a botched job.
Botched.
Yeah. For what? For at least, no, it's longer than that.
Over 5 years.
Yeah. So then in January of 1981 in the Sheffield area, an officer named Robert Hydes, a sergeant out on patrol, noticed a car with a man and woman inside that had number plates that did not match. And that means like the license plate was registered to a different vehicle than the car that it was on. And the officer realized that this was a vehicle offense and was like, wait a second, that's not okay. Boom, go to the police station. And once he had the man at the station, he saw a sketch from Maryland's attack and was like, yeah, this looks like that guy. So the officer went back to the area where he had found the car and did a quick search, and he found a hammer and a knife stashed near the car. I know. Stashed near the car. After 5.5 years, and by luck and chance, the Yorkshire Ripper had been caught. And literally because he changed the plates on the car. That's why.
I mean, how many have we heard? Like, wasn't it Joel Rifkin got caught because his taillight was out? You know, like, it's those little things, man.
Well, and again, I mean, they feel so emboldened that they're like, they're never going to catch me, which if he had not done something this careless or stupid or whatever you want to call it, he probably would not have been caught, because they were not anywhere close to catching him.
No, and he knows this because he's reading the papers and they're like, absolutely not a person with a Yorkshire accent. It's got to be Geordie. It's got to be from Sunderland. Like, just...
I know. The Yorkshire Ripper was identified as Peter William Sutcliffe from Heaton, Bradford, West Yorkshire, England. He was in nowhere does that say Sunderland? Hate to break it to you, does not say Sunderland. So he was 35 years old at the time, and once in custody, he gave a voluntary statement and outlined each murder in detail, starting with Wilma McCann. Okay, so we're going to get a little background on Peter Sutcliffe. Peter Sutcliffe was born on June 2nd, 1946 in Bingley, West Yorkshire, England, to John and Kathleen Sutcliffe. He had 5 younger siblings, 2 brothers and 3 sisters, and they were a working-class Catholic family. Sutcliffe was described as being a loner in his teen years with voyeuristic tendencies. His father was often violent towards his mother, and Sutcliffe was known as a, quote, sissy and a, quote, mother's boy. He believed that being feminine was a weakness.
Oh, so that's a hatred of all women then.
Right.
It doesn't say he believed that sex work was wrong or immoral or a weakness.
When he was 15, he left school and took on several different jobs. He worked at a factory or mill, and then in 1964, he became a grave digger when he was 18 years old. That led to a part-time job at a morgue. While at this job, he bragged to his friends about robbing bodies from the morgue.
Where was this friend during this investigation? This friend knew that the Ripper was active, right? Yep. That feels like something that you'd be like, you know what? I have this friend, and he used to rob bodies from the morgue. That feels like something that fits here.
Right. Well, and knowing the police, they would have been like,
can't be. That sounds completely normal to me. Get out of here. What accent does he have? No.
See? No.
Get that shit out of here.
Exactly. In 1966, Sutcliffe met a woman named Sonia Zerman, and the two began a relationship and got married on August 10th, 1974. They had no children. And then in 1976, Sutcliffe got a job as a truck driver and was considered to be a trusted employee throughout his time there, including during his killing spree. So now we're going to get back to the investigation and arrest. Sutcliffe knew about the tire tracks and the 5-pound note that was found. And he also thought that he was in the clear after the tape was released with the Geordie accent, which he was. After the arrest, the media talked to several people, including Sutcliffe's father, and he said that he had no idea that his son was behind the murders, and said that he had been a kind and timid child. Neighbors of Sutcliffe said that he was normal and friendly. Well, and again, going back to that quote, whoever told you that evil was ugly, right?
Yep. Yeah. And again, that's how, although his MO really didn't, he probably could have looked like a sewer rat, basically, like, because most of the time his victims did not even know that he was there. He comes up from behind. Sometimes he would engage a sex worker under the pretense of using her services, but I mean, for the most part, he's just coming up behind you and knocking you over the head. Like,
true.
You wouldn't know, but you know, that's every single one. I mean, sometimes, you know, you can look at a serial killer and be like, oh, he kind of looks weird to me, but
yeah,
still, I mean, that's how they get close to people.
Well, and it's interesting to me. It's not the first time that we've heard about something like this, but for him to be married when he has such a deep-rooted hatred of women. But that could be like the Madonna versus, you know, the I guess is what they say, Madonna versus, you know what I mean? Like, you put your wife up here on this pedestal. It's like she's pure, quote unquote, pure and all this stuff. Yeah. And then all other women, he's taking out his violence on all other women, right? But it's just strange to me that he did get married.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true.
But once Sutcliffe had been arrested, Andy Laptew from the Yorkshire police found that he had actually been interviewed when the 5-pound note was found. He was one of many employees interviewed, and he told police that he never went to sex workers because he was recently married.
He said, I have no need.
Well, and if he said it, it's of course true.
Exactly.
However, his boot prints and size matched the ones found at the crime scene, and when Laptew had brought the report to his boss, he was eliminated because he did not have a Geordie accent.
And Laptew also said, dude, this guy's a dead ringer for the sketch that we got from the woman who survived an attack by him and remembers what he looks like. Right. And he said that George told him, get out of here with that. If anybody else mentions that sketch to me again, they're going to be directing traffic the rest of their career. I don't want to hear it.
I can't. But listen to this, guys. Okay, so before his arrest, the police had spoken to Sutcliffe not one time, not 2 times, 9 times. 9.
And the reason they went back to him 9 times is because he kept fitting the different, he was in the right areas at the right time. He was this, all of these things that fit.
Right.
So they'd go back to him.
Right. And the police were like, no. I mean, I'm sure there were some that were like, hey, we need to look at this guy. And George was like, stop it. You guys are wasting my time with this.
Yeah. Damn well he doesn't have a Geordie accent.
Right. And the 5-pound note was traced back to his work. And after his arrest, when the media spoke with his boss, he said that they all jokingly called him the Ripper.
Because he'd been talked to by the police so many times. And they were like, oh, there's the Ripper. Like, because it was. Yeah. And it was so foreign to them that he could be, right? Like, he's, Peter, he's a nice guy. Like, whatever. He's a little, snap him like a twig maybe, but he's a nice guy, whatever. Like, They just couldn't imagine that it was him. But he had been talked to so many times that they called, oh, my God.
I know, right? It like thumbs up their asses. On January 5th, 1981, Peter Sutcliffe was charged with 13 counts of murder and 7 counts of attempted murder, and he pleaded not guilty to the 13 murder charges because, he said he was guilty of manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility, which is basically like guilty by reason of insanity here in the States. And his reasoning for this was that he heard voices that ordered him to kill sex workers while he was working as a gravedigger. Except for one thing, that if that's true, which it's not, but let's say it was, he didn't just kill sex workers, okay? So you didn't even do it right if that's what you were told to do.
Exactly. He said that the voice of God was telling him to rid the world of sex workers because of this like moral high ground, basically.
Yeah.
You did it wrong.
Yeah. You couldn't get that right, okay? Ugh. And again, can't stress it enough, that didn't fucking happen.
Didn't happen. Yeah.
Right. His trial took place at the Old Bailey in London due to the local knowledge of the case in Yorkshire, and he was Britain's most notorious serial killer by this time, and people from all over Britain lined up to outside to get a seat for the trial. During the first 2 days of trial, they went through what Sutcliffe had told the police after his arrest in full gruesome detail, and then Sutcliffe actually took the stand, and he was tense, he was on edge. He explained to the courtroom about these voices that he heard. 3 separate psychiatrists diagnosed him with paranoid schizophrenia, but the prosecution noted that his wife, Sonia, had previously been diagnosed with schizophrenia and that Sutcliffe knew how to put it on for the psychiatrists.
I don't know. I mean, you could, maybe not. If one of us got arrested for something, they could be like, well, they've talked about those things before, so they'd know how to pretend. But Edmund Kemper did it. I mean, it can happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And I hate to call him clever because I don't want to call him anything that but I don't know if he knew that the police would be like, hey, look over there. Like he's, it's like a flashbang, right? He's like, oh, this person must have a Geordie accent, so I'm good, I'm safe. But I mean, to me, it seems very clever the way that he went about it because he was able to get away with it for so long.
Yeah. And I mean, the police I know that there are some things that you need to put out to the public, but they're putting all of this information out. So when they say we've narrowed it down to just somebody with this particular accent, I mean, come on.
Yeah.
He's just like, boom. They have no idea.
Right? In May of 1981, after 6 hours of deliberation, Peter William Sutcliffe was found guilty on all counts, and he was sentenced to a minimum of 30 years before he would be considered for release, which I think is not long enough.
Not long enough, no. After the trial, the police looked through other murders that could have been perpetrated by Sutcliffe and spoke with him about it. According to police, he seemed quite proud of what he had done. You want to know somebody who was proud? The day that Sutcliffe was arrested, George Oldfield, and then I don't remember the other guy's name that was also like high up in the investigation or whatever. You should have seen the cheesing smiles on their faces at the press conference. I mean, George was literally like I could not, it was like bigger than a Julia Roberts smile. I mean, it was like, So
And
big.
can we congratulate ourselves when we literally found him on a whoopsie?
Yeah, like they were like, that's good old fashioned police work there. See, we did it. We told you we'd catch him and we did. And it's like, literally, despite your best efforts, you caught this man.
Mm-hmm.
Despite your best efforts. Like, it was almost like you hoped he would continue.
I know. And I'm thinking, like, did they try everything? Did they ask him if he would just maybe turn himself in? Did they try that? Oh, they did try that, but it didn't work.
It didn't work.
They tried everything.
They asked. I mean, can't make him do something he doesn't want to do.
Exactly.
Yeah. In 1981, he also confessed to the murder of Marguerite Walls. He attacked her on August 20th, 1980. He followed her, attacked her from behind with a hammer, then tied a rope around her neck. He dragged her into a garden before strangling her and hiding her body. Now that is a little different. Still relatively the same, but a little different.
The hammer, but the
Strangling
aspect.
Marguerite was his 13th murder victim. The surviving victims of Peter Sutcliffe are Anna Rogolski. I'm sorry. She was 35 years old and was walking alone in Keighley when she was attacked. He hit her with a hammer and slashed her stomach with a knife. Olive Smelt was attacked on August 5th, 1975 in Halifax. Tracy Brown was 14 when she was attacked on August 27th, 1975. Do you see these years?
Mm-hmm. And these
in
are
Bradford?
so close together. And if he had done what he set out to do, there would be 20 victims.
Yes. He hit Tracy 5 times in the head after talking with her for about a mile. He took off when a car passed by. She reported this to police. And then later, when the Ripper killings were happening, she went back to them and said, that's the guy. The guy that did this to me is the guy that's doing this. It's the same thing. I talked to him. I know what he sounds like. He had a Yorkshire accent, and they said, you don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah. Kindly leave and thank you.
My God. Marcella Claxton was 20 when she was attacked in Leeds on May 9th, 1976. She was pregnant with her 3rd child and almost lost the baby after her attack. She suffered from chronic depression, headaches, and blackouts after her attack. Maureen Long was attacked on December 14th, 1977. Upadhyaya Bandara was a 34-year-old doctor from Singapore. She was attacked while walking home on September 24th, 1980. Sutcliffe hit her and she was left unconscious, but he fled after that. And then there was Mo Lee, the art student from Leeds. Lastly, Teresa Sykes, who was attacked on November 5th, 1980 in Huddersfield. She was hit from behind, and when her boyfriend heard her screams and came running over, Sutcliffe fled. After his arrest and conviction, Sutcliffe began going by his mother's maiden name and was called Peter William Coonan. What's the point of that? You're in jail, dude. What's the point?
No idea.
Everybody knows who you are. In 1984, he was officially diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia and was transferred from prison to a secure psychiatric facility, Broadmoor Hospital. During this time, he applied for the right to parole, but in 2010, a ruling stated that he would never be released from prison.
Good idea.
Yeah. In 2016, he was declared mentally able to leave the hospital and was sent to a maximum security prison. Sutcliffe experienced several assaults while in custody. Peter William Sutcliffe, a.k.a. Coonan, a.k.a. the Yorkshire Ripper, died on November 13th, 2020 at the age of 74 at University Hospital of North Durham in England. At the end of October in 2020, he was treated for a suspected heart attack, and after testing positive for COVID, he refused treatment. After the arrest, Sonia offered her support throughout the trial and initially visited him while he was in custody. That's his wife. However, she divorced him in 1994, and then her visits stopped in 1997 when she remarried. Incredible that she even still visited him at all, honestly.
I know.
Despite their divorce, she remained his named next of kin, and it is believed that she planned his funeral.
That's a hell of a woman, honestly.
It's Tammy Wynette shit right there.
I know. Yeah. She didn't have to do any of that stuff, and she did it anyway. Wow. It's
Yep.
It's pretty amazing. I hate that she had to endure him, but.
Right? Yeah. And who knows? Yeah. Oh, who knows what that was like.
That is the end of the case. We want to thank you guys again for listening, and we hope to catch you on the next episode.
Bye.
Bye.